everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for our training webinar series, segment 14. Today, we're going to be talking about EMUE 5.1 and Saurian SmartUI, and we're both really excited to get started. So let's dive right in. Presenting today will be Kelly Blackman. Kelly is our product manager here at Databound. He's absolutely fantastic, has a breadth of knowledge about EMUE, so really excited to hear what he has to say. And my name is Dana Cortez. I'll be assisting Kelly today. I am the lead EMUE trainer and analyst. To get the most out of today's webinar, feel free to unmute your audio at the end of the webinar. We'll be taking questions, and that's in the left-hand corner of your screen. If you're experiencing any webinar difficulties, feel free to reach out to me at dortiz@databound.com, and you can also chat with me too in the window at the bottom. We do have a Q&A process, so if you do have a question in the middle of the webinar, feel free to ask it. There is a Q&A at the very bottom of your screen. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly to talk about today's focus.
Thank you, Danica. Greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining this afternoon. We've been working on some exciting things, at least I think, from a product standpoint around EMUE and Saurian over the last year. And so I want to talk a little bit about that today. We've had a new release, EMUE 5.1. This is a fairly major upgrade and new functionality that many of you haven't seen before. Maybe you've heard about us talking about it a little bit. So I want to talk a little bit about how we got to this point. So a little bit about our partnership with Cerner, some new terms that you may hear us talk about, and then really kind of dive into what the new functionality is and how you can benefit from it and how you might be able to migrate your existing scripts over to this, as well with another couple of features that have been added as part of 5.1. So that's really what I want to focus on today. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in and talk a little bit about how we got to this point. We've been working with Cerner obviously for a long time, and we have had a good partnership with them. Things kind of went to a different level last year based on really a lot of what customers are driving with the upgrades that are having to be done. A lot of things changing with the UI impacting scripts and that sort of thing really got the attention of the development team there. And so, there's a more integrated partnership, I guess you might say now. We've got regular recurring meetings with their development team with our main goal of just having an improved customer experience. We want to make sure we can you guys can upgrade without having to worry about critical processes that you have running that are going to break, that you're relying on EMUE for. So late last year, Paul, Eric, and myself went to Melbourne. We had an all-day meeting with the folks there, and we got to meet with them, development team, web services people, Saurian scheduling people, and really hammer out steps that we could take to make your life easier. So we've been working really good with the development team. And again, this was really driven by the updates that are coming. Every 6 months, there's a new release, there's a new upgrade with new functionality. And really the HTML5 compliant application really caused a lot of the application UI components to change. So earlier in the part of the year when we started rolling out the new grid commands, if you remember those, the get web grid, click web grid cell, some of you may still be on older versions of Saurian, so you may not have gotten to use them yet in scripts, but all that work was done based on our partnership with them. So really good working relationship there, and that kind of drove this whole, is there a better way to automate the UI? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're calling it SmartUI, kind of play on smart names, SmartUI. Just kind of doing things in a more intelligent way. So it's just that is the terminology for the feature that we're talking about. It's really geared toward improving the stability of your scripts as you upgrade, as you change and get new versions. There's another term called control array. You'll probably hear us say that a lot if you end up working with us in support calls and things like that. We're going to be talking about the control array and what that is. It's really just a collection of controls that are on any single page in Saurian. You go to look at a page, there's all kinds of buttons, all kinds of drop downs, all kinds of text boxes, tables, that sort of stuff. All that stuff is in one dictionary on the page, and it's called the control array. And inside the control array are identifiers that identify each one of those controls. And so what we've done is taking a different approach. We're using those control array IDs or control IDs and mapping those things to our smart names because they change much less frequent than anything we've ever done before. If you see the screenshot here, you'll see what the controller is. It's just the component name itself. And then to the right of that, you'll see the element string, which is also still in the smart name file. There's no modification on that at this point. But if you will remember, whenever I think maybe when we went to 42200 or one of those versions, the element strings ended up with these additional button text and underscores at the end of it. So even though those things change in the element string, the control IDs stay the same. So that's really what we want to do, is trying to transition our users and our customers off of sort of the old way of doing things to this new one, so that there's less for you to do as versions change in the future. So a little bit about the terminology there. So let's just kind of dig into it and get into the specifics of it. Before we had the SmartUI, we obviously used element strings using the web script builder to identify things. We mapped those things to the smart names, and some people used the smart names, some people didn't. Some people found them challenging to use because they didn't know which ones to pick from the list because there were so many. And then you've got the other component of it is element string changes, where there's no smart names for it. And so if you have to go through an upgrade, that means a complete manual rework of those element strings to identify the things that you're working on. Long way to get to the actual control you're looking for. If you look at the browser, you look at the frame you're in, you look at the control type, you look at attributes, and then you finally get to the thing you want. We're really simplifying things down now, down here at the bottom. And if you've used UI Builder, some of this stuff will probably look and maybe sound very similar or very familiar to you. We're using the XML path. We're using get value, set value to get and set values within the XML document. And we're using the control reference table to map those things out. So you can see from this is just a sample of a control an entry in the control reference table. In this first section in yellow is the control ID name. The purple is the control type. And then here, this pathway is the way that EMUE is now getting to the control to update it and interact with it. So it's a very straightforward way of doing it. And I think you'll appreciate that and see the benefits of it. As we talked about the enhancements that come from this, there's a few things that come from. Number one, there's going to be stability. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute. I had queued up just as a little bit of a background. I had a version of 42300 that I was planning to use for a demo today, and the technical issue, I'm not able to access that right now. So I ended up having to go back to 42100 Service Pack 2, which is many versions back, and the control IDs happen to be the same. So again, it just kind of reinforces the idea of stability over a number of releases, that things still continue to work without any changes to the script. So that's a good thing for reliability and stability standpoint. One other cool thing is that we can have the ability now to suggest smart names based on the current page you're on. And so this first screenshot is just an example of that. If you happen to be on maintain or searching for a health professional, EMUE can detect that you're on that screen, and it will bring up the one that matches that particular screen name to the top of the list. Also put it in bold so that it's really easy to find. The second part we've done down at the bottom is parsing. And if you're not familiar with parsing, there's a parse results tab inside EMUE at the bottom. It's the very last one normally. And what we've done is added the ability to parse for smart names where we didn't really have that in the past. We would be able to tell you if there was one that was invalid and it wasn't in the file. But now what we've been able to do is tell you if something has been replaced or if something has been renamed. What its replacement is, if it no longer exists, if it's obsolete. We've got the concept of deprecation now with our smart names because we're changing some things around. In some cases, we've boxed ourselves into a naming scenario that doesn't really work for the rest of the screen, so we're renaming some things. If a smart name is deprecated, does not mean that it will not function. It'll still work, it just won't come up in the list of ones to choose from. The replacement will now show up in the list for you to pick from. And down here in the bottom, you'll see some examples of of this. There was an element called identifier, and we ended up adding text box to the end of it. So this one happened to be in the script, and we gave a suggestion to use this one instead. Happens the same way if it's an element or whether or not it's a screen. You have the screen name here too. Check-in summary is now obsolete, and now it's called check-in _ check-in summary. So trying to provide some support there as well in terms of usability and smart names and being able to find what's the correct thing to be using. Benefits, I've kind of beat this one to death here, but less script maintenance. And the SmartUI really bypasses the UI now, interacts directly with the XML behind the scenes. So a lot of times many of you I've worked with before, and you'll have come across scenarios where we might have to do a Fireweb event for some reason, because now this control has had an event added to it that wasn't a part of our basic command that we had before in terms of like click web element. We may need to add an on focus or something, or fire an additional event. That stuff is irrelevant going forward. We're not really relying on specific eventing through the HTML now. All of it is happening behind the scenes. The smart name improvements make it easier to script. The suggestions reduce the amount of time it takes you to find the right name that you're looking for. The good news is that if you already use smart names, you're like way ahead of the game, and all you have to do is get the latest smart name file and add one set startup in your script, and you're off and running. Really want to encourage people to kind of migrate to that model, because it will be better for you in the long run. And lastly, speed improvements. And I say particularly for scripts that interact with large volume of controls. So if you're doing a lot of processing where you're interacting with a number of controls on the screens, and think of check-ins, for example, where you're trying to fill out all of the patient demographic information, you're filling out all the encounter information, you might be adding insurance. Interacting with some of those controls, sometimes it takes EMUE some time to populate those fields, and the more you have, the longer it takes. And you will be able to see pickups in the pace of the scripts whenever we're using the SmartUI. So I don't really have any data to show that at this point, because it's not something that I've really tested, but it is something that you will see benefit from, particularly if you have scripts that are running for a long period of time and doing large volumes of data. Now, if you got something that's running for 10 minutes, it's not going to cut anything in half. But if you got something running for several hours, you'll definitely see some improvement. Let's take a look a little bit at how this works, a little bit from a demo perspective here. So I'm going to jump over to what I've got here. So let me get logged in here. All right, so this is 42100 Service Pack 2. And if we come down here, I happen to be using a newer smart name file in an old version. That's what I was mentioning to you before. We typically tell you to use the version specific for the one you're working on, which is still the case. But since I don't have control IDs in the 42100 file, I can't really use the 42100 file. So I'm going to step through this and just show you a little bit about how it works. The home page does not have a control reference table, meaning that there are no control IDs on that page. So everything has to be used from element strings at this point. So not everything, as you'll find, not everything has a control ID. A lot of things do, but not everything does. So I'm just going to step through here and get to a couple of screens. So we're on this screen right now. This is the revised encounter details. And so if we wanted help and we were trying to do something on this screen, we hit the space bar. Now we see that we get a few options here. So this is a scenario where you could be hitting a number of different pages. You could be trying to click on something on the tabs at the bottom down there where it says encounter details, patient demographics, patient insurance. You could be interacting with something on about this encounter, health professionals tab, financial responsibilities tab. Those are the ones that we have smart named right now. So those are the reason that they are coming to the top of the list, and they're bold right now. So you could see examples where there are multiples, but at least even if there are multiples, you at least get to narrow it down to those instead of looking at 200 options. So that's one of the cool things that we can do there. I'm going to go ahead and step through and click over on patient demographics. If we look at trying to type something into a text box, for example. Now, where is this? Right here. So look at occupation, for example. Typically, you've seen EMUE will paste something, or paste in the characters and type the last one, or it will sometimes type in every single one of them one-to-one. This is just, boom, instantaneous. It just pastes the value in there. And the same thing happens if it's, regardless of what control it is. It's a drop down, a checkbox, whatever the case may be. It happens really that quickly. So that's one of the additional things that we can do there. If we look at some of the parsing things that I talked about before, if I go back to the revise encounter screen, so I'm going to exit out of this real quick. If I go back to revise encounter, this will be another example of if we're trying to interact with something on this page, and I come back up here and hit the space bar. Now it's detecting that I'm on the search encounters dialog. So I only get one option, even though the rest of them are listed, right? We bring the one that we want to the top of the list, where it's really easy to pick what we need to use. So hopefully that's a time saver. There will be pages that do not have page names. I'm not going to say that every screen in Saurian obviously is not smart name. So you're going to come across some eventually that we don't have in the list, but the vast majority and the most heavily used ones are there. And so that should be sufficient for most of the probably 80% of what people are going to work on. If we go and look at the parsing tab down here, this is the other thing that I mentioned. So if, for instance, I have this command in my script line 36, okay, it's got search encounters dialog dot identifier. Well, in most cases, we have text box, button. We have the element type control tagged on to the end of it. And this is one where, as we were going through, we said, okay, this is one we missed. We need to correct it. So we ended up adding the right label to the end of it. If we go to our parsing tab, we'll see on line 36, we get a message that says the smart name element identifier is obsolete, which is talking about this piece. And it's telling me to use the underscore text box instead. So if I come back here and I'm trying to update this, I just hit the period, I hit identifier, and now I don't have the one that says just identifier, I have the one that says identifier text box. And now I could just update it. I refresh, error message goes away. And I say error message, it's really a warning because it's not, EMUE will continue to process that smart name without that, the original one that I had there, it will process it without any kind of errors because we are leaving it in the smart name file. We're just preventing it from showing up, as I said, in the list. Okay. I encourage you to check that as you go through your process of changing over to this, because eventually we will want to get out of supporting multiple smart names. That means we have to, do additional testing. We've got to support multiple versions of the same identifier. So I would encourage you at some point in the future, we will get rid of those that are deprecated. And so you'll want to be on the latest ones. And also for the check-in summary, this is another example here. The check-in summary is one where it had a number of tabs down at the bottom of the screen, encounter details, insurance, demographics, the same sort of stuff. And so we wanted to be able to name them consistently with how we'd name the rest of them. So we ended up changing the name of check-in summary to check-in underscore check-in summary, or check-in underscore encounter details, check-in underscore patient insurance. So minor changes like that. You won't see those changes in any smart name files until you get to 4.2.300. That is the version that we ended up breaking things in. And so we released that along the same time we released 5.1, so that put everything in one time and make changes one time so you don't have to do revisit things multiple times. So as you go to 4.2.300, you will want to make sure you check the parsing tab. So I just mentioned a few of these. If you want to transition over to SmartUI, you're going to want to update to 5.1 1097. We've already released 1098, so I would just go ahead and get the latest one while you're at it. Download the most recent smart name file for your version. 4.2.200 and 4.2.300 are supported with the SmartUI right now officially. Those control IDs are in those files, so you can go ahead and take advantage of it. If you are on 4.2.300, as I just mentioned, you're going to want to check the parsing results tab and make sure you have replaced and addressed any changes that need to be made. The other part that's going to be probably a little bit time consuming if you want to go down this route is replacing element strings with smart names anywhere it's possible. I encourage you to do that anyway. Even if we didn't have SmartUI, I encourage you to do that anyway, because in the long run, you're going to be able to just get a new version of the file without having to touch your scripts anytime an upgrade occurs. So you should do that. And then the last bullet point there is the new set startup called Enable Saurian SmartUI, which we'll talk about here in just a second. That is going to be the only really script change as far as configuration goes that you need to make in order to take advantage of it. A couple of things to be aware of. I've already mentioned one of these, but if you happen to get a 42200 or 42300 smart name file and you don't upgrade to the latest version, you're going to potentially get this error here where basically EMUE is trying to look through the smart name file and try to find the element string, but instead it's actually looking up and returning the control ID. So if you happen to come across this error message, it's because you've downloaded a smart name file that has control IDs, but you haven't upgraded EMUE yet. So if you're going to get any some new smart name files, I'll just go ahead and encourage you to get the latest EMUE version too, so you can avoid this issue. And then lastly, the other note that I want to mention again is that not all the controls in Saurian have control IDs. So we can go and look at, if we look at EMUE, for example, on the Smart Names tab, here is an example on the Add Care Provider dialog. There are no control IDs for this particular screen. There are element strings still there. Okay, here's another one, CMG code. That one does have it. You can kind of go down the list and see which ones have them and which ones don't. But just as a warning, not all of them do. The good news is that you don't really have to know, because EMUE is going to take care of the switching back and forth if there isn't there anyway in the first place. Talking a little bit about the new set startup, again called Enable Saurian SmartUI. It's either yes or no, it's on or off. The default right now is turned off. So if you want to take advantage of it, you do have to add it and change it to yes. One thing I'll say about this is that what I just mentioned before, if you end up using the SmartUI and there's no control ID assigned to a particular smart name, EMUE will recognize, okay, I'm trying to use SmartUI, there's no control ID, so let me go and use the element string instead. So there's a fallback in case there is not one that has been assigned to it or one doesn't exist. It'll automatically go back and use the element string if it's there. You don't have to do anything specific, and EMUE will just take care of it as it tries to execute each command. A couple of other things that I wanted to share with the group. This one's pretty cool. It might be a tad bit confusing here at first, but I'm just going to go through the background of it a little bit. All of you are familiar with the pop-up menus all throughout Saurian, where you've got the manage list button, for example, where you've got the receivable group actions button and those sorts of things, add edit addresses. We had to click on the button, and then we had to click on an option from the menu, and then we got to the point where we had a change happen. We had to add this keyword Saurian pop-up to the end of it. So there was a lot of sort of workarounds to get that to work. Taking the advantage of the technology that with SmartUI is that we can now condense that really down into one command, where we just say set web dropdown, we say the option that we want to click on from the menu, and we give it the button that we want to click on, and it just exposes the menu, selects on the option automatically for you without having to do all of these things up here. So just wanted to demo that real quick. So if we click on patient demographics, we will get to the add edit addresses. So here's the address change button, and here is the command for that. So I'm just going to, if we click on it, we see we've got correct this address, we've got replace it, and person moved, and we've got add edit addresses. We can just put the text exactly like it is on the option here. Right inside is the option that we want to pick. It's kind of like picking something from a drop-down list, except you don't have to, it's not a true drop-down list, so we just do this. You can barely even see it when it happens, but it does click the menu, it does click the option behind it. So if you, again, it's one of those things where you don't have to worry about the eventing that has to happen in order to click on things. It takes it all within one command here. And this obviously can be a variable too if you want it to do that. So that's a cool new function. We're going to add some new things too that we didn't get a chance to implement. We didn't want to roll this out before we finished everything, but working with some of those tree structures that you've seen before, like on the in the master file where you're talking about location hierarchy, or you're talking about health professionals maintaining HPs, all those tree structures. There's some really cool things in there. We had to get really creative in the past to be able to interact with those things. And so using, again, the functions that are available to us, we can make that so much easier to be able to interact with. So we're going to add that. It's on our roadmap to be able to add some of that other functionality. We just haven't gotten to it yet. A couple of other things to share with you. Flashing has been an issue a little bit, to be honest with you. We had some issues, but some things broke with the way we were flashing things. Some of the styling changes on some of the buttons and some of the controls that we were modifying and interacting with, and many things wouldn't work. So we cleaned up a lot of that, the majority of it anyway, and then we added another little cool piece that I'll share with you too. If we look at this one here again, where we're trying to type in the occupation, we're trying to find the occupation text box. If we right click on it in Flash, it actually scrolls to the control and brings it into view if it's not, so that you can see where it is. So it's kind of neat in terms of being able to, if you got a lot of things on the page like this and sometimes it's hard to find it, you can just right click on it and it actually scroll to it. I think we go back up and show that again. If we right click and Flash, it scrolls down automatically and flashes it for you. So we fixed a lot of the issues that were associated with the flashing. So hopefully most of those things have been resolved. I'm not going to say everything has been, because there's controls behave differently. So there could be some out there that are not, but the vast majority of them now work appropriately. And then one last thing that I'll share related to the updates in EMUE is we modified the copy command. This was a feature request that someone had asked for, because I don't know if many of you know this or not, but you can present a dialogue as an EMUE script runs. So as a way to get user input from people. An example might be if you've got somebody that just runs scripts on their machine and you want to get some input from them, like a username or a password or something that they need to be able to, execute a script and log into a website. You can present a dialogue to a user and ask them for their credentials. And we didn't have any way before to accept anything that was protected in terms of encryption or anything like that. So we added the functionality to be able to take sensitive information and be able to encrypt it and store it in a variable. So that's really the goal behind this, and I'll show you them a little bit what that looks like too. And if we have a command like this is the command I'm talking about. It's a copy command. A lot of you may not be familiar with it, but you can, before you could say user input here, and it would just pop up. You would prompt a message. You could even present options if you wanted to for users to be able to pick. But now if you do something like this, encrypted, it pops up. This is your prompt. Please enter your password. If you type in something now, it's masked. Before it was not masked at all, so people could see it. You hit OK, and now we go to the variables tab, and we see that the value of it is kind of encrypted within the variable, so that no one can see what the value of that is. So it's something that some people wanted to take advantage of, and thought we would mention it in terms of what was new in 5.1 within this version. So, okay, I do want to mention that we know we've had a lot of communication recently, so it's kind of spiked here within the last month or so in terms of things we're doing with EMUE, webinars, web services coming out, which is going to be another cool, exciting thing that I hope you guys will come back and be a part of whenever we talk about releasing that. We've got a current webinar scheduled for, I think, the 12th of December. We ended up pushing that back until after the new year, just depending on if we're able to get access to an environment to use that. Right now, we can call web services with Saurian scheduling, and that works great. But we know most of our users are interested in the financial portion of it, so that's where we're focusing everything. If you do want to learn anything else about the scheduling part of it, feel free to reach out to me directly, but we've got some interesting and cool things coming up on that. In case you did miss it, a couple months ago, we ended up releasing the dashboard scheduling functions, where you can control and monitor all of your scripts from the dashboard. You can schedule them from there. You can have a little bit of control there, stopping and starting. So those things are available to you as well. And so we just got a lot of good things going on. We're looking forward to getting into the new year and developing some of the some new things that our users are telling us they're asking for. We do have an unrelated, I guess, to EMUE in terms of the product itself. We have another webinar next week talking about insurance discovery and our product that we're bringing to market to address some of the needs around uncompensated care and so forth. So if you're interested in that, you've probably seen some communications on it. Feel free to sign up for that. Rachel Bowles and Mike Burhans will be hosting that webinar. And anyway, we look forward to that. There is an EMUE 5.1 landing page on our website. You obviously know how to get in touch with us with support and our forum, and obviously give us a call if you need any assistance with that. Appreciate you guys joining us, and look forward to working with you. And let us know if you have any questions in the migration.